Good Tuesday to you all out there in the internet sphere, and welcome to SJU here on Fandom Entertainment. Today we are talking about more Star Wars. It just goes on and on forever. Also going to be discussing what's going on with Watchmen, Mission Impossible, and Love, Victor. I am your host, Emma Fyffe, joined on the table today by the one and only Ed Greer.
Hey guys, how you going?
And Rooster Williams McFeely.
Mr. Williams, he's my friend. Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
AKA Dan Murrell.
Knives Outlet, which I believe is
Knives Outlet.
Yeah.
Knives Out. That's the best
Somebody
one.
who came up with that, Ryan? Was that you? Somebody came up with that name, Knives Outlet. I think it's someone around here, and it's amazing. Yeah,
that truly is fantastic. I can't wait until we build the storefront for Knives Outlet in the new Fandom Entertainment offices, because if we built it here, it would truly just be a waste of time.
And it would collapse.
It would. It would collapse. Literally.
Yeah. Hey, let me know when you get them sharp batarangs and them ones that fold up and fit in your wallet.
Right. Clearance season is upon us. I have to call Rooster up to see what the inventory looks like.
Yeah, that'll be a hot ticket item.
Yeah.
A hot ticket item, along with the collection of new lightsabers that we've seen in the concept art for what turned out to be more than just a rumor. A while back, there were sort of whispers throughout the galaxy of something in the Lucasfilm Star Wars world called Project Luminous, which turned out to be a massive publishing project that takes place during an era called the High Republic, which takes place hundreds of years before the original trilogy, and also hundreds of years after the Old Republic. So for those of you that are fans of all the Old Republic stuff, fear not. The questionable canonity of that remains in question because that is not this. Basically, the High Republic is an era wherein the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order are at their height. The Jedi are serving and protecting the galaxy. It's a hopeful, optimistic time when the Republic and Jedi are noble and respected. What we're looking at here is a multi-year publishing program that will be rolled out in phases, with phase one being called Light of the Jedi. The period, again, on the Star Wars timeline is not going to overlap with anything we've seen in the films or the series that are currently planned in terms of like broadcast media. So again, what we're looking at here is a new Star Wars era that's going to be explored completely in multimedia, written word and illustrated pieces, if you will. So they're working with a bunch of authors that they had before. There's been a bunch of like concept. Carl Soule, who's written, Poe Dameron and Darth Vader and Kylo Ren comics, and Claudia Gray, who wrote Bloodline and Master and Apprentice. So they're working with a lot of authors that they have before, but also bringing on a lot of new talent and basically giving those people a chance to explore telling Star Wars stories in a time period that's, I think, sort of free of the heavy expectations of expanding on the canon that we're already familiar with. Ed, what are your feelings about Star Wars just really leaning into this like Camelot aspect of the Jedi or the Knights of the Round Table? Everything's great.
Well, the only thing I think is not okay. First of all, I love them committing to being kid stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that is the future, and I've seen it with my own two eyes that, like, when you're looking at ROS and going, this isn't consistent, and why'd you heal the space worm or whatever, kids are going, yay, great stuff. You know what I mean?
True.
And so if you give them something that's even more, just to put a fine point on it, I think this is Disneyfication in that they understand that a publishing arm that tries out concepts so that you can see what works on the page, and then maybe later you can develop those into movies and stuff, that works with Marvel characters, because honestly, 90% of Marvel stories suck. And I love Marvel. I'm a Marvel zombie, but 90% of comic book stories in general suck. But there's this 10% that stand the test of time from 1939 to right now. And when you can cull the best of the best parts of each of those into a story, you got a really strong story, which is why you saw the universe of Marvel be able to work so well. When you could pick and choose over 50 years of history, or
Sure.
50 years of ideas, which is what these guys are trying to do. They're trying to compact probably 50, 60 years of ideas and continuity into this big publishing thing that they can pick and choose from to make products in the future.
Yeah.
And if these make $1 billion on their own, great too.
Sure. Dan, do you think that by kind of going this comic book route of establishing some stories within the publishing realm rather than having them go directly into TV and film production, is this the right move for Star Wars?
This is how you know you're getting older. Is when you start getting deja vu, because I think this can definitely work, because the concept of using comic books and the published word to fill in the gaps of the storylines of the Star Wars universe has already worked.
Sure
it
has.
was the extended universe.
Sure has.
It's been decanonized, but it was wildly successful many decades ago for many years when there were no Star Wars movies. So is it a strategy that can work? Yes, it is, because they did it. And it did. That's what I love is like we've talked about this with the movies and trends and things that come and go. Is like every 20 to 30 years there's a new generation of young suits who are hired to come into a boardroom and pitch something that worked 20 to 30 years ago, and they're going to go brilliant. Right. So yes, this is definitely a strategy that can work because it has worked and it did work. The difference here being the previous now legends series of books and comics, etc., all existed mostly in a time where there was no supporting media in the sense of, like you had your Ewok TV movies, and then in '99 you had the prequels, but they really exploded in that fallow period between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace. Now, that's not to say that things have not succeeded that tied in with the prequels, that tied in with the new films, they have, but the origins of it.
Sure.
So I think the question mark being is, can lightning strike twice, and can you now build a new universe, capture the people that already like this other stuff, and capture a new audience? That's the question.
Yes, I totally agree with you. That I think is the big thing that we're going to be looking at with this whole High Republic, Project Luminous, whatever you want to call it, situation that's happening, is because this is now establishing a whole new era within Star Wars canon. Again, much like the Old Republic, this is an era that we were aware existed, but as far as canonically what was going on, it's nebulous. Now, obviously, they're going to define that, but are you going to be able to capture an audience that otherwise was only maybe seeking out comics or new canon novels that by and large are about characters that we know from the films and the TV shows, where you're filling in gaps in those characters' histories rather than expanding the actual universe of Star Wars? Because
I'm now listening to the Timothy Zahn's the Grand Admiral Thrawn trilogy. I've never read the books, and as a reader now, I find the
original Timothy Zahn books.
Yes, the original. Not he's doing new.
Legends
Thrawn
ones,
books, right?
There's
the
canon
Legends
ones
books.
also,
No, the Legends books, and even now, like I find them exciting. Is like I almost wish that I could have lived in an era where I was reading this as if it were actually a new Luke Skywalker adventure instead of being told by a corporation that it is now doesn't count.
Sure,
but it is very engaging for me to be like, oh, I like this. This is a new story, and it brings in like you're building on the history of these characters, and I think that's really intriguing. Now, again, you could get into the prequel problem of the sense that like with these here, you're going into an era where you know how the story ends, and so are you just waiting for people that you know to show up, or are they going to be able to build out enough characters that even though you know technically how it ends with the Jedi, that you're building enough conflict and characters? I think it's a harder job because you don't have that weight of like Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Leia, C-3PO. You can bring in new villains and stuff, but people are already attached to those characters. Can you build out all of these new characters and capture that same audience? That's the big question mark. So it's not so much a strategy question as it is and I'm going to use this word when I deem correctly, a content question, in the sense that like what is the content of the books? Thank you, Ryan. And can you build out enough character to capture an audience that you don't have the familiarity of existing characters?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this kind of harkens back to a conversation, Ed, that we were having yesterday about the idea of any good story starts with great characters. So I think that this series of books, since it is so focused on building up what was going on in that time period, as you say, Dan, it could very easily fall into the trap of focusing too much on the world building and not enough on creating characters that we find compelling. What do you think, Ed?
Well, I mean, I think in the end, that is Star Wars eternal trouble.
Yeah.
As what we were talking about. It's like they make you feel as though you've heard thousands of years of mythology, when in reality it's a bunch of crumbs.
Yeah.
That in between the crumbs you can have supplemental material from all different places to try to piece together one granola bar after but mostly it's just crumbs. And so now I feel like this is a straight effort to make the initial oats that
will eventually become a whole granola bar.
Exactly.
Keeping in mind that you have a storage room of old granola bars sitting behind the factory where you're trying to make new granola bars that you have to measure up
those
to the quality
flavors
of.
have been recalled. There's something wrong.
But but people are still buying them, man.
But they're still buying them.
They're on eBay and they're buying those flavors still.
But that does also harken back to another thing that goes on a lot with what is considered to be Star Wars Legends, is that the people who are in the story group at Lucasfilm are actually going into those books, and they are pulling aspects out of them, with the bigger things being full characters like the character of Thrawn, and putting them into the canon as it exists now.
And that's why I think what has plagued Star Wars since Disney took it over is short-sightedness and jumping into things without really thinking them through. That goes from hiring directors to announcing films that you're going to make, and I think you could trace it all the way back to the beginning, because I do think now, looking back, it was a mistake to say when they bought it that immediately all of this stuff is out, because they drew the dividing line between they're like, it's all out, it's all canon,
right.
None of it counts, we're starting over. Well, now I think they're in a position where a lot of people may have wished that they hadn't said that, because now like you put barriers into what you can't do certain things.
And some of those things were really cool. Like people, again, I'm getting a little bit of a rep for not liking Star Wars, supposedly. No, I like Star Wars a lot. And I remember reading Truce at Bakura.
Oh, Truce at Bakura.
You know what I'm saying? You're reading Truce at Bakura, and it literally opens up with Luke Skywalker being like, my chest hurts from all this lightning. Oh, I can't even take a sonic shower or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It opens up with like straight up Return of the Jedi stuff happening to Luke still, because it happened that quick afterwards. And then it gets his force powers taken by the Yalsamiri or whatever the hell, those weird force sucking salamanders that you can throw at a Jedi and they just sort of stick to their face and they can't use the force anymore. And I'm down with Star Wars, okay? With the goofiest, ridiculousest parts of it. I like Star Wars, okay? But I do believe that maybe this is their we never get to see the glory days. Like the Old Republic books in general seem to take place with like the Sith learning the rule of two, and there's always this machination, and it never seems to be like there was times of high adventure when we were all having different powers. Like homeboy had a purple lightsaber and another had a chartreuse lightsaber. It was weird. Kyber crystals were falling from the sky. They were like buffalo in the Old West. It was so nuts. You never get to see that you almost never, even in the Old Republic, you never see that, because there's all these machinations going on. So like if this is a true attempt at showing a superhero universe with these guys, because that's all it really. Come on. Yeah. These are superheroes with kind of crappy powers, I'm a telekinetic that's worse than Jean Grey. I'm a telepath that's worse than Jean Grey.
Basically all want to be Jean Grey.
They're all whack versions of Phoenix, even the most powerful ones.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's my Marvel Zombie coming out. All I'm saying is this seems to be a universe where little kids, like my little nephews and stuff, can look at, there's the brown lightsaber guy, and he does it this way. And there's the lady, Trill, or not Trill, what's those ones with the... Twi'lek. There's a lady Twi'lek one doing this stuff, and she's a little bit different than the Jedi. And they can build this universe where kids can identify with almost a Hogwarts fashion with the Jedi stuff. And I'm this type of Jedi Knight. We never got to see... The Knights were... It was almost like how if Knights were working for MI6. That's the Knights we were introduced to. Like, I sit in meetings. I got my sword under my belt like a Walther PPK. Instead, we would be treated to like, hello, and you have to announce yourself when you come in, and they put down the drawbridge or whatever. Real Knight stuff.
Yeah.
And I can't blame Disney and Lucasfilm looking at the state of Star Wars amongst us. to pull an Angela Bassett and just throw the lighter over their shoulder and walk away and say, we're going after the kids. The kids are pure.
Yeah.
We can kill the past, as Kylo Ren would advocate, because there's no pleasing us. You can please individuals,
sure,
but us now as a collective. Your legacy Star Wars fans, we've lost. We've fallen. We've fallen to the dark side. There's some Padawans over here now. Maybe there's still a new hope over there.
Yes.
And you can build them with with Project Luminous, and you can build a Star Wars empire or a republic or whatever you want to build, that they can then yell at us in 15 minutes to shut our mouths and stop complaining, because they like the movies that are about whoever this new character is that they're going to be excited about. I think that Disney has now completed the path is now complete as far as trying to please the legacy fans. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not, because Force Awakens, there's no Goldilocks situation, because Force Awakens was too familiar, and Last Jedi was too subversive, and Rise of Skywalker was nothing of anything that anyone likes. There's no middle bed. They're all, the porridge is either too hot or too cold. There's no warm porridge in the Star Wars universe.
Right.
No. So they got to burn it down and start over, man. That's why it's called the High Republic, brother. You got to burn it down, man.
Let me get some of that High Republic, brother. Yeah. You be Bogarting the High Republic.
You're gonna get the kids hooked on the High Republic.
Start them young.
Well, but just last things last. Can we talk about why it's always the past? You know what I mean? It's always the past. And even when it's a past that has no possibility of catching up to the characters we know and love, there's always that Tarantino in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood aspect, right? There's the portentousness of something real hanging over these proceedings, giving them credence. Whereas, why can't we just do it 5 million years in the future? Some dude with a freaking robot head comes, a robot head and a Mandalorian and a Mandalorian Ewok. A dude with a robot head and a Mandalorian Ewok step out of Slave 57 onto a rotating planet grid. And it's a whole new thing. And Tatooine has oceans. Dude, let's get nuts. They never do that. It's always 5 years before the thing you cared about. Someone was doing this.
Yeah.
Why?
I do wonder.
All the time.
Did they find Mos Eisley in the ocean?
Yeah.
It's
like
a nice place. Mos Eisley is so nice. Now it's been gentrified by thousands of years.
Mos Eisley is just like an all-inclusive resort now.
Yeah. It's like Ryza from Star Trek. Everybody's just chilling out in bikinis.
Yeah. No, it is. It is interesting, Ed, that you do bring up the point of for whatever reason, there is this aspect of, even though this is not going to catch up with anything we already know, and we talked about this a little off camera before the show, but even if this is, say, 300, 400 years before the Battle of Yavin, guess who could still turn up in these stories? Yoda.
Yeah.
So again, there is always the little thread of connection, instead of them truly going, you know what?
Right.
We created this cool galaxy. Let's just go have fun. As you say, 5 million years in the future.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to Project Luminous. I like a lot of the authors and such that are connected to it. I will be curious to see where things go. The concept art looks really dope. There was a dude Twi'lek wearing a crop top, just taking a page out of Tetsuya Nomura, famous Final Fantasy VI and on designer, artist, etc. And I'm here for it. Before we move on to our next segment, we want to thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, watching every day, joining us wherever you are in the world over your morning cup of coffee, which is a very small percentage of the world, or perhaps as you're winding down to go to bed at night, for turning on your notifications, leaving those comments, and hitting that bell. There we go. Be sure. Yeah, I was gonna say it wasn't bad, but it wasn't your best part.
I mean, you Magic Johnsoned them. You know what I mean? You threw it right up there.
I did. I gave him the layup. Be sure to check out Fandom IRL, where we have a video of a lawyer defending the Joker, as well as a psychologist breaking down the psyche of Harley Quinn. And there's also an honest trailer for Frozen 2. Dan?
There is. It's out now. it's about Frozen 2.
It's about Frozen 2, so you can just head into the unknown of the internet and check that out.
It has one of my favorite jokes that in recent Honest Trailer history that I don't think any of us in the writers' room can take credit for.
Oh.
I'll give you that. It was a brilliant piece of work by our editor, Kevin. So I'll tease that. I assume if it was someone else's idea, then I apologize.
But Dan is like, it wasn't my idea.
It certainly was not my idea, and I've laughed. I've seen it now probably 8 times, and I laugh every time.
All right.
It falls into the unknown.
Listen, it's a bop. I like Into the Unknown. Moving on to our next story, Watchmen. We thought it was done, more or less. However, HBO left the door open for more Watchmen after reclassifying it as a limited series. The statement from HBO in full is, we discussed with the producers and felt limited series was the most accurate representation of the show and any possible future installments. So, do you think, Dan, that we'll end up with another season that might concern, say, like a different group of characters?
This reminds me of that episode of Seinfeld when he's trying to break up with the girl and she keeps saying no because it's not like a submarine. You don't have to. He's like, you have to turn both keys at the same time.
Right.
Because I feel like Damon Lindelof has said very clearly, many times, that he's like, no, I'm good. Show's good, and HBO's like, yeah, but maybe, and he's like. No,
but
and they're like,
people liked it,
but people
and
liked
also money.
Yeah, he's like, no. But HBO's like, we're gonna put you down for a maybe. It's this idea of because the Emmys, because I believe this is about Emmy contention.
Yes,
the Emmys aren't screwing around with this whole limited series thing anymore. Like they're not letting you do. They're not gonna let you be an American Horror Story where it's just like, no, we're a limited series. So like,
right,
no,
but really
you have
it's an
recurring
anthology
characters.
series, and they have recurring like the thing about American Horror Story is it's almost like old school repertory theater where it's a lot of the same actors that come back and play different roles or just like slightly different versions of the same role, or sometimes the same role in a new capacity. Yeah, it's not a limited
all
series.
Together now, which is why I think the Emmys finally were just like, no, you have
American
to go play with sorry, Jessica Lange, you don't get an alley-oop anymore. You got to go play in the main category. So, for them to reclassify it as a limited series, number one, it does open the path up a little bit for them, but also at the same time, I think it limits their options because the Emmys have been very clear about what is and what is not a limited series at this point. So I feel like, of course, HBO wants another season because the show did really well. It was a big critical hit. They would love to bring in more, but I also feel like particularly Damon Lindelof has been very open and honest about his thoughts. Yeah. But there's, who knows, in 5 years or even a year or 2 years, they'd be like, well, actually, it's kind of like when Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix lead up to Joker were like, this is it. And then it made $1 billion. And they're like, well, we've been thinking. It's like, okay, there's no is never take a hard no as far as a new season of a TV show, a successful.
Yes, Ed, what do you think it would take for Damon Lindelof to do another installment of Watchmen?
Well, I think the context that might be missing from us discussing it so far is just the fact that, like, he had turned it down, as we all know at this table. He turned it down a bunch of times. They brought it to him multiple times across, like, years, So they have a confidence that they could get him because they did it. You know what I mean? So, like, and also he's one of these guys who I think when he's at his best, he thinks about things for years and thinks about his take and thinks about how inclusive that take can be. I'm not talking about diversity or nothing like that. How he could include other people's minds into his take is what I'm saying by inclusive. So I think he thinks and thinks and thinks, and then when he goes, oh, I know, and I could put people on, and there'll be polar bears and chains or whatever, I think once he comes up with an idea like that, he so I think he knows right now he can't do that. And so he can't commit to it. But if HBO reclassifies it in this fashion, if he does, or someone of his ilk, how about some super big lady showrunner who would look at it through that prism? You know what I'm saying? And also, I think it's also leaving this open because I think they want some of these writers and directors on the series to be like, hey, this thing that's still sort of in the zeitgeist that still could come back, I wrote on that. Me and my homies won an Emmy for that, whatever. And like, because a lot of those people are writers that were never on staffs before, playwrights and the like.
If I may speak directly to Damon Lindelof, don't do it. because I think Damon Lindelof is a really talented dude.
Oh, I do too.
But since Lost, really, he's been like Gatsby on the pier of just like seeing this like this success, this like thing that everyone loves, like within reach, and then something happens and it just all falls apart. It's like he did it. Let him. It's a win.
Yeah.
It's a win. Let him have this win. Don't stop calling Damon Lindelof. Stop saying when he gonna. He's been through it. Let him win. Let him take the W and walk off the court. Because otherwise,
I feel like he had a big win with The Leftovers, but the problem is with The Leftovers is people didn't watch it. So then you have like lightning striking twice, honestly, with Watchmen, where he did it again. So just like let him be.
Because he keeps wading into this pool of insane people like us who just define our lives by these things. And he gets 90% or 80% or 75% of the way there, but that last 5 or 10 whatever percent, and that's all that people remember. Let him have it. I'm gonna give it to him. I'm giving him the W, and I'm giving him permission to walk away. If somebody else wants to pick up the baton, let that be their burden.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a good point, Ed, of as long as we are classifying this as a limited series, which I completely agree with you, Dan, is 100% for Emmys. But it does also then leave it in a position of if HBO were to do more Watchmen, maybe it's not Lindelof. Maybe it is an anthology series that brings in different groups of writers, directors, etc.
Well, David Lindelof said that one of the reasons why that thing is so strong that he didn't decide he was an expert on racial matters.
Right.
He decided he wanted to explore it, and he hired a staff that could explore it. You know, so in that spirit, I think a lot of different creators could take Watchmen and look it through that prism. But like Dan's saying, no, don't just take some of those people, listen to their pitches. Maybe they have something that is as good or better than Damon Lindelof, but they just don't have the track record. You know what I mean? Lena Waithe just bought a first-time writer and showrunners thing over Twitter. She had her DMs open and they sent her something and she happened to like it. And it's produced by Amazon right now. And it's a really crazy pitch, you know? And it's just one of these things where like, give somebody else a chance. And he did get the win, but like in a casino, there's a reason why casinos ain't got no clocks. There's a reason why when you sit down, they bring you drinks incessantly.
And no
they just want you to eventually lose.
Keep playing. Keep playing the game.
Keep playing.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that he needs to get out of the casino. But he's got half a cigarette and 5 mimosas, and he's just like,
don't have that next rum and coke thing, Linda. Get up from the table and walk away.
Just go cash in your chips. Maybe go enjoy a nice buffet.
There's going to be cigarette girls. And they're going to be giving you theater tickets, and don't take the suite. Don't go walk out of the casino, go to the airport, get on the airplane.
Yeah, exactly.
There's going to be slot machines in the airport. Don't put anything in the slot machines. Just go. Run.
Yeah, don't be beguiled by the buffet. Those crab legs will just get you right back to the table.
There's no such thing as a free meal.
Right? Or a $7.99 prime rib.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I know Celine Dion's doing a limited run. Don't
You can see Celine Dion in LA sometime. She'll be here. It'll be at the Forum or something. It'll be real nice.
Grab your wife, pull her out of Thunder Down Under, and get on the plane.
Oh, well, you know who is not getting on any planes currently right now? It is the cast of
I love it.
the upcoming Mission Impossible installment, which has stopped production in Venice due to a coronavirus outbreak in Italy.
Yeah.
The country has more than 150 confirmed cases, with the government shutting Venice's carnival celebrations down. This quote says, "Out of an abundance of caution for the safety and well-being of our cast and crew and efforts of the local Venetian government to halt public gatherings in response to the threat of coronavirus, we are altering the production plan for our 3-week shoot in Venice, the scheduled first leg of an extensive production for Mission Impossible 7, a spokesperson for Paramount told The Hollywood Reporter on Monday in a statement. So we haven't talked that much on SJU about the impact of coronavirus on the film industry in terms of actual filming and also, releasing films in countries like China where it's really truly become a problem. So Dan, I know you've covered this a little bit on Charting.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is, obviously this is an entertainment show, and we're not necessarily here to talk about the news of the day, but there is an overlap now, and it's becoming increasingly. We first mentioned this on Charting when they initially closed all of the movie theaters in China, or at least 99% of them. The vast majority of them, right before the Chinese New Year holiday, because that is traditionally the biggest movie-going year in the world. And the theaters remain closed. There's no word on when they'll be open. There have been multiple releases that have been now delayed or canceled or moved, or the difference being that it's not like here where you work with the exhibitors to get a movie rescheduled. That is up to the government of China when your movie gets shown, or it might not at all. So that it's already impacted movies like Dolittle and Sonic. We have Mulan coming up. Obviously, Disney was expecting China to be a very large potential market for that. So, as I say every week on Charting, obviously, first and foremost, this is a human story. This is a health crisis story. This is a very ancillary part of it. But now what we're seeing is it's expanding to affect not just film production, which is also stopped, by the way, in China, and releases in China. It is now spreading around the world. We now have a major motion picture that is not shooting in a country. I read reports that there are an increasing number of theaters themselves closing in Italy. So it is becoming a global story as far as the entertainment industry and the film industry, in addition to a very serious public health crisis. But this is something that could, if it keeps going, affect potentially for some industries years of ramifications when it comes to releases, grosses, theaters that don't have a source of income anymore. Like these are the effects that we're now seeing, and it's spreading now. Unfortunately, outside of just the Chinese market, we're seeing it now into Europe, and I mean. Hoping it's as bad as it gets, but this could have ramifications that continue for weeks or months. Yeah,
it is, and it's particularly interesting too because, of course, China is where the outbreak was really first got started, and it feels like there are a lot of films that their success is very much perpetuated by their success within the Chinese box office.
A large amount of them, particularly a movie like Dolittle, which has had a disappointing run here domestically. When you have a star like Robert Downey Jr., and we've seen the strength of MCU stars or stars like The Rock in the Chinese market, it can be a very star-oriented market. That now is up in the air. And then again, Sonic the Hedgehog, a video game-based movie, I think a huge potential market in China now, just sort of up in the air. It was supposed to come out this weekend. Not coming out, that does affect the finances of a film, because it's not even that it's not even that you have to close the books on a movie. It's that the books are now open
for who knows how long.
And even God willing, hopefully very soon, when this crisis is under control and things start getting back to some semblance of normality, as normal as you can get, not even knowing still if you're going to be get a release. If the theaters are open tomorrow, would people go? It's a public opinion. There's so many just sort of issues tied to this, and now we're seeing the ripple effect going global now.
Well, and again, and as you say, ultimately, this is a human story. Our biggest concern is for the welfare of the people that are being affected by this virus. Yes. But there is a conversation in terms of the film market of you have these studios that are putting these big investments in these films that ultimately normally would probably do extremely well in that market. But now we're in a position of they're losing out on all of that money. Is that also going to affect other smaller films that those studios would maybe be backing?
Well, yeah. I mean, there are films like Jojo Rabbit and Marriage Story that had release dates scheduled that in the Chinese market that were now canceled. And if you start seeing a similar move from other countries like Italy, countries in Europe, to cease public gatherings in a sense to control this, then yes, that becomes a very large thing, because then studios start thinking like, well, do I release the movie? Do I do it domestically? Do I wait on the international thing? Do I delay the entire release? And again, you have the logjam effect of like, as movies back up more and more, how do you even figure out how to date and get these things out? They're all tomorrow problems, whereas the virus itself is a today problem.
Right, of
but
course.
the tomorrow problems themselves can be very troublesome.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things to sort through there.
Yeah. It's scary, the whole coronavirus thing.
It is, very much so.
Well, anything that precludes gatherings, that really freaks you out, you know what I mean? And then you start thinking about like just all the other ramifications besides the business stuff.
Yeah.
You know, just the social ramifications, like the social structure of a place that can't actually gather, that it seems imprudent to gather. It seems imprudent to interface with people you don't know or whatever, you know, for a time because of this situation. That's got rolling consequences.
Yeah.
That I think that we haven't been able to explore in a country that size.
And we're in a marketplace now that these studios and these corporations that bankroll them are growing at such a massive rate. I mean, we see the hundreds of millions of dollars that Disney and Warner and all of these different companies are going into now. Their earnings potential, just from a Wall Street sense, is now potentially substantially going to be dampened. Well, that affects their liquidity. That affects the, you know, like at least in the short term, what their company is worth. Does that give a company like Netflix an edge because they have a home distribution model for their new films and TV shows?
No,
Does it not?
that is an interesting
the
point.
market ramifications that it has are just like I said. Once the human element is and you have to do whatever you can do to contain that, but these are the things that are going to be left in the aftermath because that's just the way that it is. And it just goes to show, we talk on Charting a lot about how a film can do well or not do well based on completely on factors that are completely out of the control
and have
of a
nothing
filmmaker.
and have nothing to do with the film itself
That you could never predict.
Yep.
And this is one of those things where you could see certain films performing, underperforming or overperforming or who knows, based on factors that could not have been predicted in any way even a month ago or 2 months ago.
Yeah, I can definitely envision the Malcolm Gladwell book about this period, you know, about like what happened, why it happened, and how it affected all these different areas from socio-political to business to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you do bring up a good point too. The idea of Netflix and these streaming services having these home distribution models, does that then kind of I hesitate to say the word elevate because I feel like those platforms are already getting that kind of attention, but does it add like another level of legitimacy to it almost when you cannot leave your home?
Well, that's the thing. Does it further imperil the theatrical experience in the sense that, you know, you motivate people to stay home, you motivate studios to release their films for home distribution. You know, this could be this could accelerate the timeline as far as the traditional theatrical experience, because if we're in a situation, not even where here in the United States where theaters are closed, where people are worried about it, and you have a studio or two that says, okay, then you can watch it at home. Well, then that pushes it, and that's just another example of the external factors that could affect the marketplace that you could never anticipate and would never want to anticipate.
Right. I think that's the best point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, we are certainly fully in support of Paramount's decision to delay filming. You have to. There's really no choice. Yeah. So, but moving on to our last story, which dives us back into the streaming realm and into the realm of Disney. The TV series Love, Victor, which is inspired by the 2018 praised film Love, Simon, is moving from Disney Plus to the Disney-controlled HULU streaming service. The half-hour comedy, which will be retitled Love, Victor after its protagonist, will debut in June during LGBTQ Pride Month. The series from This Is Us executive producers, co-showrunners Isaac Aptaker and Elizabeth Berger, who wrote the movie and the 20th Century Fox TV, just wrapped production on its first 10-episode season. HULU brass appear bullish on the show and have already commissioned a writer's room to start exploring stories for a possible second season. So they clearly have a lot of confidence in this show. Ed, Do you think it's a good or a bad thing for the show that it's moving from Disney Plus to Hulu?
Well, I think the people who see it as a diss on some level to go from Disney Plus to Hulu are going to see it as that, regardless of what I say or if it's right or wrong. The people who see it as a diss are going to see it that way. And centrists and whatnot will say, like, oh, it's just business, you see? And maybe I'm representing that right now because I just watched High Fidelity on Hulu, and I couldn't imagine Lisa Bonet's little daughter drinking and smoking and all that stuff on Disney and having all these proclivities. I couldn't see that. Oh, would you like to watch Empire Strikes Back after you watch, what's her name? I'm spazzing. Lisa Bonet's daughter from
Zoe Kravitz?
Zoe Kravitz. Yes, I'm showing my age. She's Lisa Bonet's daughter. Dang it! And the Kravitz boy's daughter. That's who it is. No, but I mean, she's beautiful. She's sexy. She's smoky. She's a new version of the John Cusack character from High Fidelity, the novel by Nick Hornby. It's a woman sort of Fleabagging it a little bit. It's got a little Fleabag to it. It's got some Fleabag DNA. And I'm just looking at that thing. It's perfect for Hulu. It is Hulu. That thing is Hulu. And it's not Disney Plus.
Yeah.
In that same way, I bet Love Victor, when you really get to the things that they want to explore and the things that they want to give high fidelity to, as far as being accurate to real life, those are incongruous to the way that Disney has chosen to position themselves on the Plus thing to me.
It's, based on the statements and the reports, it was particularly that it involved teenagers, and they felt like the show for the subject matter was a bit too, what they deemed mature. For Disney Plus, which, I agree. A lot of people have made, I think it's a complicated issue. I know some people see it very simplistically and see this as a bad sign.
I totally get why people want to feel that way.
And I think it could be. It could be. I think that once the show comes out, will be the time to make that determination. I know that the author of the book, Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, actually publicly said, "Hey, listen, I understand that this looks bad, but I am giving Disney the benefit of the doubt in this situation." What I think it does is it opens a very odd Pandora's box as far as, like, if you're setting a standard, then what's the standard? Because if it's about alcohol use involving teens, that's one thing. But if it's about alcohol use, well, then you've got a movie like Iron Man 2 that's on the service that portrays alcohol abuse. And I'm sure, even though there's a bit of, at the end, that's, I'm sure, how the show would be too. It seems like the tone. If it's about, there's a show called Andy Mack that has a gay main character, not the title character, but a main character that's gay, so it doesn't seem like that's the thing. But then you have a show like Boy Meets World that's on there that deals with in a TGIF way, but that also deals a little bit with, like, sex and high school issues, and so like
parental abandonment and abuse.
Right. And exactly, like some very
there's some
heavy
dark themes in Boy Meets World.
Themes. So that's there. So then if you're comparing that, and then you have things like Simpsons. I was just watching it to see if it had a disclaimer on it or anything. No, then you've got a show like The Simpsons, which has got like the Homer versus the Eighth Amendment episode where Bart gets the St. Patrick's Day, gets drunk, and now he's staggering around, but it's like played for laughs. The Simpsons movie's on there that has Bart penis in it. No disclaimer, just Bart dong. So I think where you start to sort of get into some trouble if you're Disney, and where it doesn't look so great, is if Love Victor comes out and people watch it and it doesn't seem any different necessarily than what's currently on the service, then I think that opens the door to, like, well, then wait a minute. There's one obvious difference here, and is that the reason?
And if the only difference is heteronormativity, then you got a problem.
Then you have then you have an issue. But I'm going to kind of side with the author of the original book and say, for now, there's plenty of reasons that I don't like, that I am skeptical of Disney, but for now I'm going to give them, because they do have a brand.
They do,
and they with Disney Plus, they have sort of given a general mission statement. So I was very excited by the show on Disney Plus. I'll be excited to see the show on Hulu. I will give them the benefit of the doubt for now, but I do think that if they do treat these things with sensitivity, and if it seems like this would be something that teenagers could benefit from seeing, much like I thought the movie was, that's going to raise some very serious questions in my mind.
Yeah, it is interesting because, again, it's you want to look at, I think, the combination of elements that actually are addressed within the series. And if, again, it's a combo of things that you go, okay, yes, it makes sense for it to be on Hulu, then I'm totally in support of it.
Yeah.
But I also wouldn't want it being on Hulu to then make people automatically classify this as something that's more adult. Because as you say, I think this is something that teens could really benefit from watching.
I mean, the movie Love, Simon, I thought was such a... I really liked
so
that movie.
good.
And I think that if you were a teen who was, who did not identify as straight, and who was perhaps struggling with coming out or how to decide when and where to be themselves, I think that movie had a lot of things to say. And I understand that it was a very sort of, upper middle class white family perspective. And there are many perspectives, but I thought that film was a very kind of touching story about how parents struggle, how teenagers struggle, about the divisions it can draw between friends, and just a kind of a beautiful, nice, cute love story at the same time. So, I think that there's a lot of room to be. I'm going to wait and see the show before I jump into the pile on which side I want to go, but it certainly has the potential to set a very bad precedent.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
I definitely agree. And on that note, if you have not watched Sex Education on Netflix, I highly, highly recommend. If you have teens, let them watch it. Because I was thinking this about Love, Simon, and I feel the same way about watching Sex Education, that I wish there had been a show like this when I was a teen, because it does deal with a spectrum of sexuality, and it's very frank conversations about sex, and it's like demystifying it in a way that I think is really good, and I hope to see something similar from the Love, Victor series. I'm really, really looking forward to it. Disney Plus, Hulu. Again, I'm with you, Dan. I'm going to reserve any reservations about this decision until I actually see the series come to fruition.
Yeah. Well, we should. Reserving judgment isn't this business. What are you talking about?
There he is, Ed, with a moderate take today instead of the usual hot takes. But
moderate take.
That is all the time we have for SJU here today on Fandom Entertainment. Ed, where can the people find you?
You can check out my YouTube channel, Reboot It, and you can also check out Nerd Goat Podcast. I really like it. It's 5 stars, and Dan was a good guest, and you're going to be a guest. And we're going to get Maggie Mae Fish, and it's a big family of all the people I've met and gotten to know on this show, and just seeing more into their minds. So I'd love to do that. And Ed Greer Destroys on Twitter. Thank you guys very much.
Dan, charting, you
can see right now. We talk about the legacy Fox films that Disney inherited and their spotty track record, particularly financially, and why that might be. You can find me here, obviously. You can find Frozen 2 over on Trailers. And you can find me in Atlanta this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
It's a sold-out event, but you can still get streaming and everything.
Yes.
I got a big Schmodown title fight coming up this weekend in Atlanta versus Ben the Boss Bateman. So. Yes, thank you, Ryan. I think we're going to have 2 reviews this week. Onward, Pixar's movie, which opens next weekend. And then one of my most anticipated movies of the year, The Invisible Man, which I'm super excited for.
Nice.
We will be reviewing also this week. I don't know exact days yet, but you can catch reviews for both of those.
So keep your eyes peeled on SJU, Fandom Entertainment, all that good stuff to find those reviews. And if you want to see Dan via the live stream in Atlanta this weekend, you can go to the schmodownlive.com to buy that live stream ticket. Once again, I am Emma Fyffe, sold all over the internet at my name, Emma Fyffe. I messed up my little tagline there, and it makes it sound like you can buy me, which you can't. Sorry about it. Thank you so much for joining us on SJU today. We will see you guys all again tomorrow.